Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Farrell. I am an attorney at Gassman, Crotty, and Denicolo. I'm also on the Estate View team. I assist with customer questions, and if you've ever scheduled a demonstration of the software, have questions, and want to schedule a one-on-one Zoom meeting, I will 9 times out of 10 be the person that you meet with. We try to have a lot of customer support with Estate View and a lot of opportunities for our customers and potential customers to learn more about the product and how best to use it. And so we've started something recently called, which are a series of blank of the month presentations. So we have estate plan of the month, where we go through a sample estate plan and show how you can illustrate the planning you might want to do for that client using Estate View. Another of them, which we are doing today, is the calculator of the month. And the purpose of this one is to go through one of our calculators and explain the inputs and outputs, how you might use it, and just try to give a better idea about one of our tools. And so the calculator we're going to review today is the rolling GRAT calculator. And I think to best explain what a rolling GRAT is, it's good to first look into our regular GRAT calculator to get an understanding of the problem that a rolling GRAT is trying to solve. So a grant or retained annuity trust, or GRAT, the basic planning technique here is that the grantor puts in this case $1 million into a grantor trust. The assets, we're going to show them growing at 7.5% annually. The grantor, as the name suggests, is going to retain an annuity. So in this case, it's a 15-year term GRAT. He or she is going to receive level payments, meaning that the payment is going to be exactly the same every year of the term of that annuity. And for purposes of determining the annuity amount, we do a calculation based upon the 75/20 rate, which for May of 2025, when I'm recording this, is 5%. We can also show, for purposes of illustrating the estate tax savings and remaining exemption amount and so on, whether the exemption drops by half in 2026 or whether there's no reduction in the exemption. It looks like, based upon news from this morning, we'll see how things go, but that the exemption is not going to drop. And so I'm going to show that there's no drop in the exemption. Those are the basic inputs for that. And I think that's about all we need for purposes of this illustration, just to explain why a rolling GRAT might be helpful. But you'll notice the whole idea behind this is that the grantor is putting $1 million in this case into the GRAT. At the end of the term, because the growth rate, that 75% growth rate, outperformed the annuity payments that were made back to the grantor, there's a remainder after those 15 years of payments are made of $442,000. Now, things are going to fluctuate. The 75/20 rate fluctuates. The growth in of the assets in the trust is going to fluctuate. And if there is a very low 75/20 rate, that's great if you're trying to save estate tax, because the lower the annuity payments are, the more that the beneficiaries of that remainder trust are going to receive. And if you'll notice, if I reduce the 75/20 rate, we get a greater remainder. If I reduce the annual growth, the remainder is lower as well, as you might expect. What the rolling GRAT does is try to capture the change in 75/20 rate over time and help to kind of capture bad years to be fixed, bad years in terms of the growth of the assets in the trust, fixed into one GRAT over one period of time. This is, I think, like many things, best illustrated by use of a chart or illustration. So this is a chart I put together to try to help explain what's going on. So for this illustration, where the client would be the grantor is putting $100 million into the first grat. So all of these are going to be 2-year grats, but to try to mirror market conditions and what would actually happen if you did 15 years of 2-year grats. There's a different rate of return each year. I've based these numbers upon historical S&P 500 rates of return. I'll show you in a minute how in the actual tool you can change these to be any percentages you want. Also, what I've changed in each year is the 75-20 rate. We don't know what the 75-20 rate is going to be in the future, but we know what it has been in the past. So I took a 14-year, I think I'm showing 14 years in this illustration. I took the last 14 years of 75-20 rates and used those for illustration purposes. So here's how this works. We have that $100 million initial gift. Now, if this was just a plain old grat, if it wasn't 2-year grat, there'd be 2 payments. These are level payments, as you can see. And in a normal grat situation, those 2 annuity payments would be made back to the grantor. So the only amount that the grantor is getting out of his estate is the growth above the value of those 2 annuity payments. But instead, in rolling grats, we take that first annuity payment. Instead of going back to the grantor, we fund a second grat that has, as you can see, a beginning value of the amount of that first payment. When the first grat makes the second annuity payment, it makes it to a new third grat. When going back to the second grat, it's going to make its first payment to the third grat, and it's going to make its second payment to a new fourth grat. And so on and so forth. You can see these payments made as it goes on. Each grat is making 2 payments and it's receiving 2 payments from the previous 2 grats. This goes on and on and on, and you could continue this on for the lifetime of the grantor. The wheels on the bus keep going round and round. That is sort of the idea behind this. And so if you have a bad year, you're locking that into the grat. And the thing about this, if you have a bad year, there just won't be any remainder trust funded, because the annuity payments made to the 2 trusts wasn't less than the growth. But you've kind of captured that bad year in that one grat. And you get the benefit of, if over time the 75-20 rate fluctuates, you aren't stuck to the 75-20 rate in the year that you started the grat. So that's kind of an illustration of how it works. We can show the actual estate tax savings and so on when we jump into the rolling grat calculator, which I'm going to do now. So I'm going to go back to the home page, and right below grat we have rolling grats. I'm going to start with the more simple pro inputs and just kind of go over those with you. So we have the transfer date. This is the date I'm recording it. The second input we have is to choose the 75-20 rates that you want to illustrate. So I mentioned this briefly before, but we took the rates from 2004 to 2024, January of each year, and we entered those here. You don't have to use those rates. We just, without knowing what they were going to be, thought this would be a good way to illustrate this. I think these additional ones I had just added, but it ends at year 21. And you can add additional years. You can also change the rates, and those will be the 75-20 rates that we use in the illustrations. Have the same sort of inputs for growth rates. As I mentioned before, we took the S&P 500 annual growth rate and have entered that here. Notice there are years that had negative. amounts. So it's good to kind of illustrate market conditions. And we have those here. If you want to target it to a specific kind of cumulative growth rate over time, you can enter that here and then adjust the growth rates pro rata based upon that. You can add additional years, you can remove years. So we have a 7-year-old grantor. Like in most of our tools, you can enter his or her date of birth and it will give you the his or her age at nearest birthday, pulls in the life expectancy, which is 15.4 years. We're going to assume that the grantor lives for 15 years. We're showing death at age 85. We're going to illustrate these GRATs going on for 16 years. Here, like we had in the regular GRAT calculator, you can choose how the payments are structured. And I'll show you this a little bit more when we see the outputs, but they can be level payments, again, same payment for each of the 2 annuity payments, or it could increase 20% annually, or we can even show the year 1 payment being 90% and the year 2 payment being 10%. Now, most planners recommend that there be some gift element to the funding of each of these GRATs so that it is not zeroed out, so that there's absolutely no gift made for federal gift tax purposes. But you can set so that when each of these are funded based upon the annuity payment amount, that they'll be considered to be a reportable gift of whatever amount you set. You can set that to be a flat percentage. So in this case, I'm setting it so that there's going to be, for the funding of each GRAT, there's going to be a $1,000 gift considered to be made. But you could also do that as a percentage of value. Keeping a 40% estate tax rate. Here we have the income tax rate. Here we get questions about that. What this means is that if you had investments that you were putting into the trust of $100, that you would annually pay $2 of income tax. So it's a little bit different than what we typically think of as income tax rate. That's what we mean for purposes of this input here. And we have $1 million of initial value in the first GRAT. If we go into the Pro Plus, we get a couple of additional options related to discounting. It is going to give you a warning that it's not recommended that you do a discount rate above 6%. But if you did want to show that the assets being placed into the trust were discountable, you could enter the discount rate there. All right, I'm going to click to see results. If you've never used the state view before, very briefly, I'll give you the lay of the land of what most of our calculators look like and how they operate. On the left-hand side, we have the inputs, the same inputs that we just saw on the previous screen. At the top, we have a summary of each of the GRATs that we're illustrating. So I'm going to walk through these for this first GRAT that we're showing. So we had an initial value in GRAT 1 of $1 million. We did not discount it. It's level payment terms. And the payment terms are, we're not showing, let's see here. We're not showing the payment term here, but you can see that down below. We see that the grantor is age 70. We're going to show 15 GRATs, illustrate 16 years of GRATs. The average annual growth rate we're showing is 8.8%. We have those $1,000 per year per GRAT funded reportable gifts. So those totals $15,000 in reportable gifts. At the end of this 16 years illustrated, the total that will be in those remainder trusts, that each of those remainder trusts is the growth in those assets that is above the amount of the annuity payments that are made, will be about $3 million. Because we have 15 GRATs, at the end, there's going to be nothing in the GRATs because it's all going to be paid out. But there'll be $1.2 million in estate tax savings from the remainder trusts, the value of those remainder trusts being outside of the grantor's estate. There's also additional estate tax savings because this is a grantor trust and the grantor is paying the income tax on the trust assets. We can we calculate that amount here, and then we show total estate tax savings. One thing that's nice about estate view is you can compare different scenarios next to each other. So I can click duplicate. It's going to create a rolling GRAT 2, which has the same inputs as rolling GRAT 1, but I can adjust something to see what the results will be and compare them to the previous illustration. So maybe I show that this one, the payment terms, instead of being the same each year, are increasing 20% annually. And we see that there is a little bit of a difference in the estate tax savings. I'll duplicate this again, and we see that there's a third GRAT. And this one we do 90% payment year 1, 10% payment in year 2. And we see that there is a little bit of additional estate tax savings as a result of that. At the bottom right of the screen, we have this details tab. You can go through this and click on each of the illustrations that you've entered on the left-hand side, and you can see year by year what's happening. Now, this often defaults to not showing this series of columns, which is highlighted in blue and called GRATs, a separate column for each GRAT. If you don't have that highlighted, you just get sort of the cumulative amounts as a sum total in the cumulative, all of the remainder trusts, all of the GRATs, and so on. But I think it's pretty helpful, at least to kind of see how this is operating, to show a different column for each of the GRATs. So you'll see here we have 15 total GRATs. You can see, in year 1, or we call year 0 this year, there was $1 million put into GRAT 1. A payment was made to fund GRAT 2, and there's a remainder. And then a second payment was made to GRAT 3, and that left $81,000 and change in the remainder trust, which then is going to grow based upon the growth rates that you entered every year, or not, or if it's negative, it'll drop. Then we have in GRAT 2, this was funded with this amount. It made a payment into, I believe that would be into GRAT 3, its second payment into GRAT 4, and so on and so forth. And you can see the value in the GRAT, value in the remainder trust in any given year. We show the year-end total in all of the remainder trust, the year-end total in all of the GRATs. So this would be the amount that's left over after both annuity payments have been made. And the year-end total in GRATs is the amount in any of the GRATs that haven't made both annuity payments. So that's the difference between those two. And then we have the combined value of both of those amounts. We have the estate tax savings from having those assets in the remainder trust, which can now grow outside of the grantor's estate. There's estate tax savings from the burn, which is the grantor paying the income tax, which is not considered to be an additional gift. And then we have cumulative savings on that, total estate tax savings from the burn, and then total estate tax savings. Couple notes about the, just these are general things about estate view, but I like to mention them in case you're not aware. I mentioned this briefly here, but you can flip through and see the different illustrations that you created. You can also, if you don't want a column, a row rather, for each year, you can show only every 2 years, and so on. Also, pretty much every area of estate view can generate a screenshot. And the nice thing about doing the screenshot using our screenshot tool, as opposed to using the screenshot tool on your computer, is that if you use ours, anything that is hidden because your screen isn't tall enough or wide enough to show it, will be included on the screenshot. It's an image that downloads to your downloads folder typically. So you can click the screenshot button here. It'll take a screenshot of all of your inputs. You click the screenshot here, it'll give you the summaries table. click on the rolling GRATs details, it will give you a screenshot of the table that's here. You can also export this to Excel. And when you do that, I'll do it now and open it up to show you. You basically get an Excel version of this table down here. And opening up now, and I will share that with you. So you get that table, but in an Excel spreadsheet that you can edit or send to the client or keep in your records for your own planning purposes when you come back and look at the planning that you did for the client in the future. You can also go to File, Save Screenshot, and it will take a screenshot of everything on your screen. And that shows up just about in every one of our tools. We also have some nice other client deliverables and also sort of learning tools for you as the planner if you're not particularly familiar with a particular estate view calculator. You can choose which of the graphs that you've selected that you want to generate the outputs for. We have a general explanation, which this one actually doesn't update to the particulars of your client. It's just something you can download. It's about 2 pages, and it explains what a rolling grat is with examples. Something that is a very nice client deliverable and that is fully customized for your client is the PowerPoint presentation. So if you're planning to send this to your client, you can enter the client's name, your title, your firm name, and your email address, and those will all show up on the PowerPoint. I'm going to click Submit, and those will download to my Downloads folder. Before I show you those, I just thought of something else that is a little hidden feature of Estate View, which is nice. We get asked sometimes about customization options. And if you go into the home page and click on Account, and then click Customization, you can come in here, update your email and name. We also have the ability to add your own custom client disclaimer to our PowerPoint presentations. So you might have something that you always include at the bottom of your email signature, and you can copy and paste that into here. It will show up in the PowerPoints. You may also want to have a strongly worded disclaimer that says this is for illustration purposes only. We don't know what the 75-20 rate is going to be. We don't know what the growth rate is. We're just guessing, and for illustration purposes, showing you what your estate tax liability might be if you implement this planning. Something like that. We have something to that effect, but you might want to strengthen it and use your own disclaimers. You can enter those here. What made me think of this tool is that you may want to include your logo on the PowerPoints. You can do that by clicking Choose File, selecting the image file. It can be a PNG or a JPEG, and upload that, and it will show up on the PowerPoints. And click Update, and then you'll always have your logo and that disclaimer on the PowerPoints. So I'm going to head back into Rolling GRATs, and now I'm going to open up first the general explanation, so you can see what that looks like. Switch over to show you that. So as I mentioned, this is not customized to your client, but it does have a nice explanation of what a rolling grat is, with a nice illustration at the bottom to explain how it might work in one particular instance. We kind of drafted these explanations for you as the planner for your own education, but it's definitely something that you could send to a client who wants to learn more, or copy and paste or edit it briefly into a client letter. The next client deliverable that generated is a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to show that to you now. So here's the PowerPoint presentation. This is something that we kind of intend you could use in a client meeting. You could also just email it to a client. You'll notice that it's pulled in your client's name if you entered it, the date that you prepared it, and so on. We have our own disclaimer, but you could add your own like I showed you. So first thing, we have an executive summary. It shows that this was set up without discounting the assets at $1 million. It's paying out 437 in change annually over the 2 years that first grad is, and it's using level payments. It explains how the 75/20 rate impacts the annuity payment amount, and says, as I mentioned before, that a very small gift is typically considered to be made, but as we mentioned on the next slide, most experts recommend making a minimal gift, which you can see was like that $1,000 gift that we illustrated. We explain first what a typical GRAT is, sort of where I started with this presentation, showing you the GRAT calculator, how that works, and then illustrates what a rolling GRAT is and how it's different. And we took that illustration I showed you before and included it in the PowerPoint presentation, which, as I mentioned, I think is a good tool to explain this to somebody visually. The next slide, we try to explain exactly what's happening using your client's information. So $1 million, we're not discounting it. The assets stay with growing GRAT for 15 years. About 3 million ends up passing to beneficiaries, and you save about almost $1.3 million in estate tax. Here is a slide with the assumptions that we're using, basically the inputs that you entered. We take screenshots of those 75/20 rates and growth rates that you entered. Also a nice thing, as I tried to explain briefly earlier, you'd probably want to explain that to your client, so the client understands what we're basing the growth in 75/20 rates on. And then we have a sort of one-page summary of the estate tax savings, and you see a screenshot of that bottom table and the cumulative estate tax savings. So that's the PowerPoint. Hopefully you can find good use to this, maybe share it with a client or another planner, or even for your own understanding of how the tool works. So that's a brief overview of the rolling GRAT calculator. I'll mention lastly, we mentioned this a lot, but you can also share this calculator with a client or anybody else by clicking share with client, generating a 6-digit passcode. It creates a URL. Anybody you send this URL and passcode to can open up the rolling GRAT calculator with your inputs and can update the inputs themselves and play around with this type of planning. The last thing I want to point out is that we recently, within the last probably 2 months, added rolling GRATs as an option in our married and single client comprehensive planning tools. If you're new to Estate View, the comprehensive planning tool is what I consider to be the flagship feature of Estate View. It allows you to illustrate the cumulative impact of multiple estate planning techniques laid on top of each other. So for instance, we can show initially what happens if your client does nothing. We can see the estate tax liability that might be due on the second death if it's a married couple. And we can show them the cumulative impact of funding a bypass trust on the first death, maybe putting their home in a QPERT, doing annual gifting into a gifting trust, and so on. And one of the options that we've added is to illustrate the funding of a series of rolling GRATs. So you can see that in this purple here, and we see in this case, it's a $5 million initial funding. There's nothing in the remainder trust because the annuity payments, have not been made. On Bob's death, there's nothing in the GRATs, I think because I can show you here, if you click on rolling GRATs here, it'll scroll down and take you to the inputs for the rolling GRAT illustration, and maybe it's more helpful if I go through them here. So there's a 5 million assets in assets transferred. We're using 2-year terms. We don't allow you to change that in the rolling GRAT illustration. We're going to stop funding the GRATs after 5 years. So after the 5 years, the final annuity payments will just be made back to the grantor. And you can choose whether it's the the payments are level, increasing 20% annually, or that 90-10% split. If there is a discount rate, you can enter it here. You can also click here, and again, you can change the 75-20 rates over time. And we give the illustration here. As I was mentioning, there's nothing in the total in GRATs because the GRATs went on for 5 years and Bob has lived to 10 years, but we see the amount in the remainder trusts. We see on Bob's death, we see the amount in the remainder trust on Mary's death, and all of that is passing directly to the beneficiaries, not subject to estate tax. The final annuity payments, though, after the 5 years, do go back into the estate. I can show you as well, if you go to the annual amounts tab, we have added accounts if you are showing a rolling GRAT for both the rolling GRATs and the rolling GRAT remainders. So if you come in here, you get sort of an account summary with debits and credits of everything that's happening in the series of GRATs. So initial funding of 5 million, we see the growth, we see the annuity payments being made, the funding of the new GRAT with the annuity payment, growth outside of the estate, and so on. The growth will be outside of the estate, and the remainder trust is showed in this rolling GRAT remainder account, and you can see overall the growth on the remainder and the balance cumulatively of all of those remainder trusts. We have added the rolling GRAT, if you choose to show it, into our other client deliverables. So if you click client letter, we've added a rolling GRAT option. You can choose which scenarios you want to illustrate in the letter, including rolling GRATs, and it will include those in the client letter. Same with the PowerPoint. If you choose PowerPoint and you selected either here or at the top of the inputs to show a rolling GRAT, then that will show up in the PowerPoint that is generated. Well, that is a summary of the rolling GRAT tools that we have available in Estate View. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions as you use this tool or about anything else in Estate View, please send me an email, and I would love to take a look and get back to you. My email address is peter@gassmanpa.com. That's GASSMANPA.com. You can also send an email to estateview@gassmanpa.com. Both will go to me, and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for your time today, and for those of you who subscribe and use Estate View, we hope you enjoy it and were helped by this video. We do plan to do these Calculator of the Month presentations monthly, at least for the foreseeable future. So be looking out for the link to the next one, as well as to our estate plan of the month videos and all of the other webinars that we offer both through our law firm and through the Estate View software. So thank you very much. Hope you all have a wonderful day.